Assassin's Creed created for itself a unique position where it combined the old and the new in its narrative. By developing a modern story connected to an ancestral story, Assassin's Creed was able to branch into a very interesting sci-fi fantasy venture. Where Assassin's Creed could have easily just written a story without the modern day perspective, the writers decided to go for a fairly different approach that was quite ambitious. Developing the character of Desmond Miles and the concept of a first civilization allowed for Ubisoft to create a unique aspect for Assassin's Creed that was interesting, and it allowed for players to see the world of the assassins in our modern era and how it connected to the old world. However, the modern-day story of Assassin's Creed was wasted heavily in my opinion. It could have been much deeper, much more interesting, and much more powerful. Instead, Assassin's Creed has now basically foregone developing an interesting modern story after the release of Assassin's Creed 3. Layla is simply not as interesting as Desmond was, and several titles of unnamed modern-day protagonists delivered via cutscenes was nowhere near enough to satisfy a storyline the writers had created. Plus, now that we know about Assassin's Creed Infinity a bit more, the modern-day story will no longer even be present in the games. Due to the topic of this video, a lot of Assassin's Creed lore and games will be spoiled throughout, so if you aren't really familiar with a lot of the backstory of Assassin's Creed, here's your spoiler warning. When the first Assassin's Creed released back in 2007, we were introduced to Desmond Miles, a bartender who's taken by Abstergo to relive the memories of ancestor Altair in order for Abstergo, who are actually modern-day Templars, to find the Apple of Eden. As we later learn, the Apple of Eden was used by an ancient group of aliens named the First Civilization to create humanity to serve its will. Desmond was not given too much development in the first game, but we still got important pieces of lore via Desmond's perspective that helped to set up the rest of the modern-day story until Assassin's Creed 3. In the second Assassin's Creed and the remainder of the Ezio trilogy, we learn even more about Desmond Miles as he matures and his work with the assassins. We meet his father William Miles, and we explore the perspective of the modern-day assassins even further. The modern-day story included moments within modern-day settings where familiar assassin techniques from the old were implemented into modern real-life situations. We got a glimpse at what could be the setup for an entire Assassin's Creed title set in the modern world. We lived through Desmond and his adventures quite frequently, but something always felt missing. For the most part, people don't frequently mention Desmond when they talk about Assassin's Creed. We often refer mainly to the ancestors whose stories we explored. This is obviously because the majority of the game is related to the ancestors, with some Desmond and the modern day sprinkled in on the side. We simply just spent more time with the ancestors. However, this was clearly wasting potential that the modern day story held. Assassin's Creed seemed to have wanted a modern-day component in order to help give more weight to the sci-fi elements of the story, but it's like the writers weren't confident in that plot. They knew that people would prefer to play as the ancestors and be assassins, so they watered down the modern story to make room for these ancestors to have the vast majority of gameplay in the series. Then, at the end of Assassin's Creed 3, Desmond Miles was killed off. There didn't really seem to be a need to kill him off. His death was anticlimactic and the precursor for the destruction of the modern-day story. The original idea that was proposed by Ubisoft for Desmond was that he would continue to live and go through ancestor memories to gain skills, and eventually there would be a final game that would have him be a master assassin. In fact, this was what the voice actor was told, and the creators of Assassin's Creed wanted the series to eventually come to an end. However, like all corporatized cash cows, Ubisoft couldn't pull the plug on its most recognizable IP and one of its biggest profit streams ever. And because of this, they couldn't continue pushing Desmond's story forward forever. Eventually, his story would have to come to an end in order to continue the series onward. So we make it to Assassin's Creed 3, where Desmond dies and the modern-day story does along with him. From then on, we get introduced to no-name modern-day characters that have no substantial meaning to the series before we get to Assassin's Creed Origins, where we are finally introduced to Layla. Now, Layla is an okay character, I guess. At least she's not a no-name pointless character, but she's not as developed or as interesting as Desmond. I found myself annoyed every time the game pulled me out of the Animus, as I just wanted to explore Bayek's life. I didn't really care for Layla, and she didn't seem to have much narrative grounding either. Assassin's Creed Odyssey continued the streak of having a pretty awful modern-day story with Layla. Sure, there was a lot of lore regarding the role of the Isu in Assassin's Creed and the First Civilization, all that, as well as the origins of the Templars through the Cult of the Cosmos, and then Origins gave us the Order of the Ancients, but still, there was a lot of substance lacking from the modern-day story, because most, if not almost all of this stuff was delivered in the Ancestor story only. So Ubisoft was missing marks left and right, no direction, no understanding of where they wanted to take their own plotline. With Origins, it really was just a reboot to the Assassin's Creed franchise, but they couldn't disconnect immediately from the modern-day story. Otherwise, they would have had to change the entire franchise name, and well, Assassin's Creed is what makes them money. Then, out of nowhere, like a saving grace, Valhalla, although I didn't like it much, seemed to be heading back to giving us a substantial modern-day story. Layla accidentally frees Loki, or Basim, who meets William Miles, and now all of a sudden we got the setup for something very, very interesting. But with the track record at Ubisoft regarding the modern-day Assassin's Creed story, and the announcement about Assassin's Creed Infinity, I feel like it's not going to last for long. The problem I have with the modern-day story is that its existence is interesting, but its overall execution is subpar. For a long and packed game like Assassin's Creed, where the grand majority of the narrative and gameplay is not dedicated to the modern story, we are not able to properly connect. Fans made do with what was given, and it seemed like the setup for an apocalyptic event like what was spoken about could have been very interesting and intriguing. Yet it just didn't work. Why? Because Ubisoft realized that the story could not continue forever at the rate it was going. Desmond dying was basically just an admission of failure on Ubisoft's end regarding their modern-day story. And the worst part is, a modern-day Assassin's Creed is not far-fetched or weird or unheard of in the slightest. Ubisoft could have easily created a game that took place in the modern day. If they could insert a DLC into Watch Dogs Legion, then they could certainly make an Assassin's Creed in the modern day like the DLC in Watch Dogs Legion. It was executed properly, worked well, and made sense. Why on earth it took them a whole other video game franchise to give us a proper modern Assassin's Creed, I will never know or understand. But like I said earlier, Assassin's Creed would not be able to keep going if it ended at Desmond, so killing Desmond off and moving on from there was the only way to keep it going. Ubisoft really wasted the potential of its modern-day story, and it has essentially become just a thing that exists in Assassin's Creed. It's not substantial or as interesting as it used to be. The narrative direction was taking a better turn with the end of Valhalla, but it makes no sense that it took so many games for them to realize that the modern-day story they wrote still exists. If they wanted to make Assassin's Creed without the modern day, they should have just announced that Origins was basically a reset point and that there would be no more weight to the modern story. Assassin's Creed Mirage reportedly has no modern day story in it, and it will just be set in Basim's life, so they can do that. And that's what they're doing with Infinity now. Any Assassin's Creed game that releases after Mirage will be in the Infinity Hub, and Infinity will serve as the continuation of the modern day story, which means there will be no modern day story within Red, Hexe, or any game following. But basically, Ubisoft knew narratively they messed up with that story and they couldn't recover too well, so they just ditched it. And with that being said, thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed that video, feel free to leave a like and subscribe with notifications on so you never miss out on another upload. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are on the way Ubisoft handled the modern story. Don't forget to check out my military sci-fi books and my newspaper. The links to those, along with all my other links, are in the description below. Thanks again, Symbiosis out.